And let's, before we begin, go to God in prayer. Father, we want to thank you for the many blessings that we get to enjoy each and every day. We are thankful for this opportunity of study in the middle of the week, or the first of the week. We pray that you would continue to watch over us, continue to be with us in all that we strive to do. Help us to apply these words faithfully to our lives. Pray you'd be with our shepherds as they watch over us and continue to be with us as we strive every day. And pray you would also lead us to a lost soul of this world that we can bring to your feet. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. Revelation chapter 18. Class Wednesday night, we had gotten down through verse 11. We were discussing some aspects of verse 12, so that's where we'll pick up in the class this morning. This is right in the middle of a section where the world is mourning the fall of Babylon. And so it's going through this different classes of people and of society. And we have the kings of the earth who are mourning earlier in verses 9 and 10. We have the merchants of the earth beginning to mourn in verse 11. And then in verse 17, we'll pick up to another class of people. But as these people mourn, they are mourning the loss of their lives, their income, their way of life. They're not really mourning the loss of Babylon, as we can see their selfishness kind of evident through some of these phrases. Verse 12. So the merchandise that no one would buy from them anymore is listed beginning in verse 12. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and bodies and souls of men. While Rome is going through this collapse of all that they've known, the people who profited from Rome are mourning her demise. So one thing we had begun to point out in class Wednesday night when we wrapped up, the merchandise that is listed in verse 12, it is fascinating. Gold, silver, precious stones, pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, scarlet, all these items are reflected in a prosperous, luxury-driven society. Rome was wealthy. Rome was well off, and all the merchandise bought, sold, and traded and profited off of in Rome reflected that. Especially the first few items, the gold, silver, precious stones, and pearls. That's all jewelry, all precious stones reflected in absolute extreme wealth. Where we had stopped on Wednesday night was when we looked at the particular clothing items. So he says there in verse 12, the fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet. It is fascinating. You see these colors being used and these items being used here. The harlot was clothed in scarlet back in chapter 17. And so we see these luxury items once again being brought into the picture as Rome profited off of these things. And of course the color scarlet does reflect sin and something given over to sin, but all these ideas, all these items converge on the extremely wealthy, luxurious living. By the way, several of these items, especially silk, would have been imported in from China. So that was not something that was necessarily native or a native product of Rome itself or even the Roman province, something they imported. Then he goes on to list the woods, the citron wood, every kind of citron wood, objects of ivory and objects of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble. The citron wood was something that had a very beautiful texture to it. It was made, extravagant furniture was made from it. It was imported from North Africa, as you would have expected something like the ivory. That was something that was not necessarily native or easy to get your hands on. All of these little bitty nuances of this merchandise, reflected Rome's influence and Rome's ability to import and make money and the extent of their reach and influence. They were a very successful empire through trade. And all these little bitty nuances pick that up. In verse 13, he says the cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour, and wheat. Again, all things that were somewhat typical of import for countries, but cinnamon especially was imported from China as far as we can tell. Incense was specifically thought to be imported from India. So all these things are kind of coming together with Rome's success in trade. Several of these things were used in Rome for ointments and perfumes. Again, think luxury and wealthy, well-to-do. So all these spices, all these fragrances reflected Rome and how well off Rome was. A country or a nation that spends this much time and energy and effort pulling in resources like this is a country that's well off. They're not talking about bringing in just food. They're not talking about trying to import food, exporting items so that they have trade to bring in food. Food was not an issue in Rome, at least not for those who were in with Rome. Several of these items also were used in sacrificial systems to gods. And we recognize that even from the Jewish customs. But you have several of these incense and frankincense and fragrant oils and wine and oils. All these things are reflected in sacrificial systems too. And so all these products they're bringing in. It says fine flour and wheat, and then goes on to list some things that would be more typical of trades. Cattle and sheep, horses and chariots. These are some of the little nuances you don't pick up on if you're not really paying attention to the Greek. Not that I am a Greek expert by any sense. But the word chariot here is actually a four-wheeled chariot. Not the typical two-wheeled chariot like wars that you typically think of. You know, every time you see the Near East culture or even the ancient Roman culture, you always see the two-wheeled chariots because they were for war. These are not two-wheeled. These are the four-wheeled chariots, which kind of bring to mind again, bringing in products, exchanging goods, trade, commerce, things like that. This was the idea of wealth and riches. So not only did they trade in all of these other things, but it even says they traded in bodies and souls of men. So not only were they so well known for their customs and trade, but they are actually exchanging bodies, humans. The New American Standard, I think, reflects this a little bit better, as the New King James says, souls of men. Jack, how does the very end of that read? I'm sorry to zero you out, but I know you use the New American Standard. Very end of verse 13. Slaves and human lives. See, that's reflected a little bit better. It's not that they're exchanging souls, but it's as if they own the souls of these people. They are so callous towards the trading of human life. This is what you see from a very depraved society. Human life is as common and insignificant as fine flour and wheat and cattle. That's a depraved society. By the way, these trades of slaves and human lives, that was a very common thing in the ancient culture. They were used for any form of or any type of servant stuff. You would see it in daily common life. They were household slaves who took care of the house itself, who took care of the food and the clothing and things like that. There were even educational slaves that were really just the tutors for the children or the housekeepers for the children. Then there were the more advanced depraved societies, kind of like Rome, who would bring in slaves and human lives just to use in the gladiator-style combats as disposable objects to kill for the entertainment of those around. You can see that in lots of the history books as you read through how bad Rome really was. Verse 14, and the fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. As the last several verses have really brought to mind, the harlot was not just a religious entity. And she was not just a governmental agency. She was really a fully depraved entity, one who infected all areas and all manners of life. She had influenced and corrupted the world with her lustful and worldly thinking. It had gone everywhere, permeated the world. But now, as those who had longed for these sweet, juicy details of the lustful behavior, when they look for it now, they will not find it. And just as she longs for those things, she will not find them, she will not be satisfied. The problem is, if all you ever look for is those sweet things you should not have, it's going to rot you from the inside. It's kind of what's being described here. She's longing, they're longing for the fruit that your soul is longed for, but it's gone from you now. You will not find it. You will find no more of it at all. You can only search for those things for so long before you find yourself wanting. That's the problem with looking for nothing but temporal things and seeking fulfillment in nothing but temporal things. The lifestyle that she had come to know and love, and all those who had profited off of her had come to know and love, they would find no more comfort in it. And that's the verse we're looking at here. I indicated something a little bit Wednesday night. I don't know why my days are mixed up to me all of a sudden. It's apparently Wednesday morning, and you guys didn't know it. But I mentioned this casually on Wednesday night, and I wanted to kind of bring it back up now. And I found this quite fascinating. One of the scholars I read preparing for some of this material and preparing for this class, his commentary was written in 1979. 1979. That's been a few years ago now. That was a long time before I was born, to put it in perspective. But that was a while back. I want you to consider what he says here. By the way, he does keep this in perspective. He recognizes this is the Roman Empire, that this was a book written to a specific audience at a specific time in history, under a specific genre. He keeps all that in perspective, but there is this slight application for us today, and I want to share it with you. He says, what about the United States, which has been a land of plenty and great abundance? It has taken much for granted, wasting and squandering its resources. Is it approaching a time when it shall reach for the great abundance bestowed upon it by God and find it gone forever? It is doubtful if there is any other consequence. Now, I want you to think about what he's saying. He's saying, are we, as the United States, and no, we're not going to get political, okay? No, we're not doing that this morning. But he's saying, are we falling into the same problem? Rome, who thought itself above reproach, Rome, who thought itself invincible, Rome, who thought itself so prosperous and pursuing the lustful habits of the world around it, are we doing the same thing now? Now, I know that Christians in general are not, but I believe our society very much so is. That was written in 1979. It has not gotten better, okay? Verses 15 and 16. The merchants of these things, who became rich by her, will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. As the vision continues, it's really reiterated once more just how bad this destruction, how bad this loss really is. They were comfortable standing close to her making money, but when they watch her demise, they keep a distance for fear of her torment. They watch her weep and wail, but they do not intervene. They do not run in to aid her at all. It depicts a twofold tragedy. It depicts a people who are unwilling to help her and a people unable to help her. You see, when you go into a society that is so fully depraved, this is the result. You're alone. You're alone. There's nothing that anyone can do to help you, and there's nothing that anyone will do to help you. The people who had profited off of her back, the people who had made money off of her, they had got what they wanted, and they were unwilling to go in and help her. It's kind of a sad story as you watch this unfold, but that's the vision. That's the vision. And the cries of these people in verse 16 echoes the cries of the kings in verse 10. Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls. It echoes the same thing the king said. She was so great, but they put all their trust into her, and she, like a harlot, let them down. That's why she's called the harlot. She's untrustworthy. She is not dependable. You cannot count on her, and they had, and they'd lost as a result. In verse 17, For in 1 hour such great riches have come to nothing. And every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? Really, the first half of verse 17 ties with verse 16, but it's still the same point being made. In 1 hour, a city so rich, a city so fantastic and so prosperous, in 1 hour is brought to nothing. And by contrast, all the time it took the city and it took these people to get rich off of her, it's all done away with in 1 hour. I made the comment Wednesday night, it takes a whole lot longer to make money than it does to lose it all. It should remind us how temporal it is. It should remind us of how unstable it is and how lying, how deceitful riches truly are, as the vision tries to tell us that as well. The riches have come to nothing. The third class of people introduced is verse 17, the shipmasters, the sailors who made their living as sea traders upon the ocean. Even they stand at a distance. Do you see that, verse 17? The vision over and over and over again is reiterating this point. They stood at a distance, unwilling and unable to help. They don't want to help. They just want their money back and they want to keep going on with life like nothing had happened. Nothing to do but watch the city burn. They stand at a distance, they watch the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? The sea, several different times in the vision, is explained to be masses of people. Here, it seems to actually just be the sea, okay? It's actual sea traders who have come up and made their profit off of this woman. It is, I think, a powerful, subtle point through the vision. There's a difference between love and lust. Love and lust. Those people did not love this woman. They lusted for her. And when it got down to the hard stuff, lust does not make you sacrificially serve or save. They wouldn't help this woman. They watched the smoke rise from her burning and do not intervene. It's because they lusted after her. They did not actually love her. She was unlovable. She was unlovable, unworthy and unable to receive it. In verse 19, and by the way, several of these figures do continue to repeat. I think we've probably noticed that. I've probably belabored the point enough that you picked up on it, but it does continue to repeat. In verse 19, and they threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Of course, we're familiar with the customary act of mourning or lamentation, the dust on their heads, the crying out, the weeping and the wailing, all signs or acts of grief. And for the third time, a similar statement is made. Alas, alas, the great city, and now it is no more. There's a powerful thing being expressed. By all three of these times it's expressed. The wealth and the temporal pleasures and the riches that this city had provided, all of these earth dwellers reveled in. But now it is gone away. There's nothing to do but lament. The great city is great no more. She's brought to nothing. And all those who made their living on the ships of the sea, who became rich by her wealth, now they have nothing now. They have been made desolate because she is made desolate. In every case, the lament is not for Rome. I want you to see that. It's for themselves. Again, you can see a depraved society. It's just reeking of selfishness. The kings of the earth, the merchants of the earth, the merchants of the sea, not once do they go, wow, cry, 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 the city is no more. It's cry, 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 the city is no more, and it hurts my pocketbook. You see that? Selfishness. Well, what do you expect? In a society given over to trade and commerce and riches and wealth and temporality, selfishness comes from it. There's nothing specifically wrong with trade and commerce and wealth and riches. Sometimes we have those points confused in our society. Abraham himself was a very rich man. And God nowhere told Abraham, you need to just get rid of all your wealth. We kind of confuse the rich young ruler. Well, see, that's what I need to do. I need to sell all my riches and follow the Lord like the rich young ruler was told to do. No. What you need to do is get rid of everything that stands between you and serving God. If materialism is what's standing between you and God, you do something about it. If it's other gods, you do something about it. Materialism was a problem in this vision. And that's why it is hammered on so much through the vision, because they served that as if it was their God. Revelation's great point is materialism leads to a death, a miserable death at that.
Is that what the word fruit refers to in verse 14, the materialism?
The fruit, it's possible. I think in many ways it's quite possible. The fruit in verse 14, well, they're longing for that fruit that they've planted and sown. Okay, the reaping and sowing principles. So they've planted these fruits of materialism and wealth and pleasure and lust, and they want it back. Yeah. But the problem was, they've went through all this, they're not getting it back now. Now, as this is again reiterated, 1 hour she's made desolate. Took her years to build her wealth, to accrue her riches, to establish her place of lust and influence and prosperity, and in 1 hour she's brought to nothing. Verse 20. In verse 20, rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Rejoice. Vindication has come. I want you to see something, because this is a powerful contrast. And of course, one of the main points behind the vision is this constant contrast. The last several verses have been full of mourning and lamentation and grief. All those who put their trust in materialism, all those who put their trust in the harlot, they are mourning and weeping at their losses. But in contrast to that, all those who have the heavenly viewpoint, all those who have their sights set on the throne of God, he says in verse 20, rejoice. So mourning over here if you put your trust on the wrong stuff. But if you've been following the right things, you can rejoice. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. The heavens called to rejoice. When the dragon was cast down in chapter 12 and verse 12, the heavens were called on to rejoice in that occasion as well. This is not, and I think we need to appreciate this is not a delight in the undoing of peoples. This is not, hey, people got smacked around, people have lost their lives, people have miserable existence now, and we're just excited and happy and gloating about it. That's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is vindication, things made right. These people had blamed Christians, had punished Christians, had persecuted Christians, and no more would it happen. He says, rejoice over her. The cause of Christ was victorious, would be victorious, is victorious over evil. Righteousness is vindicated. Righteousness is shown to be successful. There's plenty of reasons to rejoice. Justice has been served. And we're going to see this, especially verse 20. We're going to see it again in chapter 19. We'll see it a little bit in chapter 20. Rejoice. Righteousness wins. Dennis? Yeah. Yeah.
To consider the difference between love and lust, the difference between serving God and serving ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. The reminder through the vision, you better make sure you're bowing to the right throne. And on your throne, riches cannot sit. Only Yahweh, Jehovah God. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that section? The last few verses we've looked at. The next few verses, the finality of Babylon's fall. Verse 21. We'll read down through verse 24. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall not be found any more. And the sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. And no craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more. And the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. And the light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more. And the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth. For by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. Verse 21, a mighty angel. This is the third time the vision introduces a mighty angel. And every time it does, it emphasizes this crucial time in the story. This strong angel takes the stage. Chapter 5 and verse 2 with the scroll that the Lamb only the Lamb could open. In chapter 10 and verse 1, when the little book is introduced for John to eat. And now we see the mighty angel once more introduced. Is it the same one? Is it a different one? I have no idea. All I know is it is a significant one. It is the mighty angel, the strong angel. As this woman had dealt out so much violence and wickedness against God and God's people, the violence would be visited back upon her. It says the angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea. And then says, thus with the violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, shall not be found anymore. We made the observation Wednesday night because of this particular chapter and some of the things it teaches. Those who would try to reject the authenticity of Revelation would say Rome still stands. But it is not the same Rome that stands now as the Rome was of John's day. That Rome is no more. The personality, the nature, the violent persecuting spirit, the awful force where it was the deifying of the Roman Caesars, none of that happens today. And even, truthfully, even during World War II, when Italy was really one of the superpowers of the earth again, it still never did this stuff. It was not a force specifically intended to persecute Christians. It was not deifying the Roman leadership, and nor was it saying, bow to Lord Caesar or be killed. That Rome has ceased to exist because the vision. Curtis? Yeah. 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 Yeah, absolutely. The vision being revealed to John depicting these great truths. God will win. God will win. In fact, remember the theme of the book. Jesus wins. Jesus wins. And all those who stand with him will win. This force will be no more. It's coming down. It's being dismantled. Picture by picture, scene by scene. This is to our culture today, this is a movie. John is watching this movie as it unfolds. And it is graphic, it is detailed, it's quite awe-inspiring as it depicts Jesus winning. This city who was so arrogant in its glory and so fascinated by itself, it says that with a great millstone, it's going to be thrown down. With a great millstone, it will be cast into the sea and disappear and be no more. Phyllis?
While this is happening to Rome and they're being destroyed, what was the state of Jerusalem at that time?
Jerusalem was no more at this point because Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70.
Yeah, I understand that, but that was still a city. I mean, their religion and everything was gone. I mean, the temple was gone, but is this during the time of the Maccabees?
No. Maccabees was intertestamental.
Okay, well, timelines. Where does Jerusalem play a part in all this?
Jerusalem, after AD 70, Jerusalem does not play a part anymore. Okay. Now the city in some sense still existed, but it was so totally sacked in AD 70 that there wasn't much left. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, you talk about the saints, you think the saints are still, a lot of them are still in Jerusalem?
Not really, because after AD 70, they dispersed. I mean, that was the whole warning Jesus gives them in the sermon before his crucifixion in Matthew 24. When you see these things, when you see the city of Jerusalem surrounded, Luke's account says, then you are to flee. So I don't know if there was much of a Christian population in Jerusalem at that point, because at that point they had already dispersed and fled. Okay? Does that help?
It does. I picture Jerusalem as being overrun by these generals and all this other stuff after destruction and how that played a part in it.
Yeah, and it doesn't when you come into the vision of Revelation. Yeah. So as these scenes unfold, the angel has already basically told, the vision has revealed to John, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. And so now the angel, in a graphic illustration, says, okay, let me show you what's going to happen. I'm going to take up this rock, and I'm going to hurl it off into the water out here, and it's going to sink to the bottom. Be found no more. He says that's what's going to happen to this city. It will be cast down and found no more. Verse 22. And the sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. What do those things all have in common? There you go. Merriment, happiness, joy, festivities, all things known in Rome. All things a customary thing in Rome. It was one big party, and they lived it up and enjoyed it. So the sounds of music that once filled the air in this great city, the sounds of music that went with the sensuality and the frivolity and pleasure of this lifestyle and of the temporality, it will be heard no more. It's done away with. No cause for it. In verse 22, he says, no craftsman of any craft shall be found in you anymore. What does that bring to mind? What does the craftsman bring to mind? Maybe, I'm sorry? Ornate, possibly. What did you say, Phyllis?
The craftsmen are often referred to as those who make items.
Yeah. So you've got this idea of trade, of business, of profit, because you've got craftsmen making things, selling things, buying things, trading things. You've got advancement and productivity that paved the way, by the way, for their entertainment lifestyle. This is how they paid for all of it, through craftsmen, through products and services rendered. He says, no more. It will be found in you no more. So the vision continues. The very last sentence in verse 22, the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you anymore. What's the millstone bring to mind? Food. That's right. Food. The millstone in a city as successful, a city as large, a metropolis like Rome and those like this city would be, that millstone would run 24 hours a day. They're trying to feed livestock and trying to feed people. It was the sound of a city going somewhere, a sound of productivity, a sound that paved the way for excitement so that a city like Rome could thrive. All of these booming nature, all these little nuances in verse 22 depict that movement, that excitement, that noise. And yet, he says it will be heard in you no more. No more. So a city that once had this thriving, bumbling atmosphere, he said no more. It's done away with. In verse 23, and the light of a lamp shall not shine in you anymore. What does that bring to mind? Why would the lamps be shining? You think of you and me, man. You're in here, Dennis. It's nightlife, folks. It's parties. This is the extravagant, luxurious living that Rome was known for. And that those cities like Rome, who were given over to so much lust and so much temporality, were known for. Nightlife, extravagant living. And he says, no more. It's done away with. The voice of the bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you anymore. What's the idea there? It's kind of repeated from the earlier statement, by the way. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride. It's similar It's similar in nature to the sound of the harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters. It's this idea of merriment, frivolities, fun, festivities, nightlife. All these things kind of come together, and he says, no more. It's not happening anymore. You've enjoyed it, you've lived it up, but no more. Verse 23, for your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. So all of this extravagant living, this wealthy, prosperous lifestyle, folks, it was paid for by the craftsmen and by the merchants who carried all of this. And the vision says, no more. These merchants were the great men of the earth. The idea there, and I think the New American Standard reflects this, is the idea of princes. Princes of the earth. Royalty, wealthy, prosperous living. All things provided for Rome. Provided by Rome. All things in which they deceived the nations through. One thing that's kind of fascinating about some of the statements there, the last half of that sentence in verse 23, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. One thing about Rome and that nation, that empire, they were quick to assert their standard of right and wrong. And when they did that, the world was quick to accept their standard of right and wrong because they were such a powerful force, they couldn't be opposed. And so if it was right and holy and good in Rome's eyes, then everyone in the nation should accept it too. And everyone under the influence and the dominion of Caesar should accept it. And they did, for the most part. They were deceived by her, by them. They set the law for worship and daily life. And what they did was misled, corrupted, influenced, and devoured all those who submitted to her, like a harlot, when they should have raised up and purified. I want you to make another connection here. This is, again, later in that same particular scholar's work, he brings this back to the United States. This criticism could also be made of the United States through America's traffic with the world during the past few decades. Again, this is 1979. Through the past few decades, the people of earth have adopted her false standards and worship of the material instead of being raised and purified. All people have a job. And when all people come together, collectively we have a job. We are, as individuals, to raise up and purify, to help people serve God. And when we come together in a collected effort, whether we're talking about congregational work or whether we're talking about even governmental work, we should come together and help people glorify and serve God. Rome did not do that. Rome took all of her influential power and used it to corrupt and to devour and to destroy. And we're dangerously similar. Dangerously similar. Now, don't misunderstand me and think I'm telling you the harlot in chapter 17 and 18 is the United States, because I did not say that. We're still looking at a historically contextual book here, okay? But again, we can see some of the same parallels today, as we all really should see, not just in a national sense, but in an individual sense, okay? We still struggle with materialism. We still struggle with bowing to the wrong God. We still struggle with not seeing the heavenly viewpoint, getting so wrapped up in the chaos that is this world, while forgetting Revelation chapter 4 and 5 still depicts God on His eternal throne, untouched, unstained, uncorrupted by this world. We still struggle with that, do we not? Don't lose perspective. Set your mind on things above, not on things of this earth. God still reigns, God still rules, God's still holy, and God will still vindicate. Okay? Dennis? Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and there will always be a tendency to do that. There will always be a tendency to call evil good and good evil, to justify oneself. And as the vision reminds us, you can justify yourself to your fellow man, but that does not change how you stand before God. He is still there, and He is still answerable to. Verse 24, and in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and of all who were slain on the earth. In her. That is not a literal statement. This is not simply people who dwelt in the city of Rome or dwelt in the province adjoining Rome. This is those who had accepted her standards, those who dwelt safely in Rome, this world city, this worldly city. So the attitude, the temporality, the worldliness, the lust, the seduction, all that embodied by the Roman Empire and represented by Rome itself, these people had dwelt in. They had enjoyed and been prosperous themselves. It was always cities like Rome and always empires like the Roman Empire that persecuted God's people. This is why this is the fourth beast of Daniel's vision. So the other empires that preceded Rome, they were of the same nature. They persecuted God's people. They made it difficult to serve God. It was just the fourth beast, the Roman Empire, was the best of all of them. Best may not be the best word there. It was the greatest at its job. It devoured and destroyed the saints and those who tried to serve God. It stomped out the way of righteousness. In her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all those who were slain on the earth. Rome was going to be held responsible for its bloodshed. And that idea that permeated the culture of the day would be responsible for the bloodshed. All these atrocities they could have stopped. All these atrocities they could have prevented, but they would not. I want us to appreciate, we've made this observation, this does go beyond Christians who were physically killed in gladiator-style challenges. Okay, this is not just about physical bloodshed. This is about spiritual bloodshed as well. Those who had adopted her carnality, those who had made the compromise and lost spiritual blood, she was guilty of all of it. She was guilty of all of it, and the blood was just as real. Chapter 17 and chapter 18 are just as appropriate for us to consider in our time. Again, not trying to take the application beyond the context of the genre and of the history. But folks, we still fight these temptations. And we must wage the war with them. It is tempting to give in to the riches of this world. It is tempting to pursue those riches. It is tempting to give in to lustful behaviors and seductive things and carnality and the flesh. But folks, the vision powerfully reminds us, if that is your God, if that is the God you choose to serve, you are hopelessly and woefully lost. And God knows which you are. Phyllis?
I know that this doesn't represent Catholicism, but I came from a Catholic background, some of the others in have too. You stop and think about it, it says that there we were craftsmen and falsehood and all that, but you think about Vatican City. They're still ahead there.
Yeah.
They're still making shrines to be sold and make money.
Yeah.
They're still trying to, in a small sense, some of this can be applied to that. You say we're still going to apply it today.
Yeah.
I was thinking about all that when you were talking about this. There's still a small faction of that going on now. And if you talk to a lot, I have a lot of Catholic friends. If you talk Bible to them, religion to them, so many of them don't say Jesus or the Lord says it and say the Pope says.
Yeah.
You know, and
That's their authority. Yeah, that's their authority.
that might be a bad comparison, but that's what that reminds me of.
Well, and I do believe, as long as we're very careful to recognize the context of the history and of the genre, there are a lot of rich applications. I think this is why the elders asked us to go through this book, because there are some rich applications to today. We can't lose sight of that. Sometimes we try to find that balance, and if we're not careful, the pendulum swings too far. We take the viewpoint, well, none of this is futuristic and none of this is out there in the future, and so everybody that believes in premillennialism is wrong. But if we're not careful, the pendulum swings too far and we don't see any application for us from the book. We've got to be careful. Now again, keeping all of it in context. Absolutely. You know I'm a context man, okay? But we've got to understand the history, we've got to understand the genre, we've got to understand the nature of this book and the purpose of this book and the audience it was sent to. But that doesn't mean there's not extremely rich application that we can pull from it, okay? And I do believe you're right, by the way, to an extent, Phyllis, that there's always been beasts, okay? There are beasts today. There are, in a sense, harlots today, like what we've looked at. But none of them were ever as good. None of them were ever as efficient as the Roman Empire. Okay? And so again, specifically it's the Roman Empire. Certainly we can find application from it. Dennis?
Basic question is who, what, when, where, how, and why.
Yeah.
You say with God's word, you have to ask, what does it mean? What is the context? How is it inspiring me?
Yeah.
I can't get application out of it, then I'm not really studying that.
That's right. That's right. And this is one book that really has some rich application. We'll pick up with chapter 19. No, we won't. Not Wednesday, will we? It'll be next Sunday. We'll pick up with chapter 19. Singing night.